So I'm not going to go through their record, but the teachers themselves know what the record is. And Coretta McDonald also knows about that record because she spoke about it, how teachers were treated in that period. So I want to remind all those teachers on strike today about that record. But their claim is that we have not treated teachers well. There is not enough money in the budget for teachers. We're spending all the resources on infrastructure, and we can therefore afford to pay teachers more, and we should pay teachers more. Well, first of all, I want to give you some basic numbers that we should all know, because one thing about this strike is that it gives us an opportunity to probably do an in-depth analysis of the education sector and also to scrutinize the record of the teachers' union. So first of all, $135 billion of $1.1 trillion budget was announced in the budget. That's over 10% of the budget went to education alone in this year's budget. So the focus has been on several things. On better working conditions for teachers generally and for the students. Because ultimately, it is about the students, the education of our children. Teachers are just one component of this. An important component, and we appreciate the work that teachers have been doing across this country. They've done a great job with our children, but ultimately the goal is to have a better education for our children, to make sure they have higher quality tuition, etc. So part of that budget, yes, is for rehabilitation of schools and construction of new schools. Now, who would benefit from this? It's people who go to school, and these are our teachers and our students. They would have better facilities in the schools, so the teachers could have more comfortable working environment, and our children could have a better learning environment. It seems as though APNU doesn't want us to construct schools or rehabilitate schools. Every cent must be spent only on wages and salaries. So a significant part of this budget is to do precisely that. We have also been spending more resources to make sure that they have better classrooms. And so you'd see a lot of this, smarter classrooms, more access to computer training. And in this year's budget alone, we have had set aside $2.5 billion to buy textbooks for our children. If you go to private schools, you have to buy your own textbooks. $2.5 billion so that they can have more access to learning material. But if you look at our spending overall on the education sector, in 2019, the last budget of APNU, they allocated $52.7 billion to the education sector. If you divide that by 170,000 kids in school, you would come up with 310,000 or $25,800 per month. That is $310,000 per year you spend on a child. So you take the whole budget, you divide it by the number of students across the country. It gives you an annual spending on children in the education sector, $310,000 per child. And if you divide that by 12, you get $25,800 per child spent per year, per month. Our budget now is $135 billion. So we took out the $8 billion for UG, 4 for UG, and 4 for gold. So we come down to 125 or so, 127, but we use $125 billion. And we have approximately 178,000 to 180,000 students now. So This comes up to $694,000 that we spend per child per year now. This year, we're going to spend. If you divide that by 12, it's $57,870,000 per month that we're spending now per child. It's more than double what they were spending per child, $25,800 in 2019, the last budget that they had. More than double what we're spending per child. Considering that in, say, the average salary, the average tuition fee at the private institutions for a child is about $100,000 per term. It goes from about $40,000 for nursery to about $120,000 per term, for secondary and stuff. But we say we are putting it conservatively at $100,000 per term. In private sector, people pay $300,000 on average per year, 3 terms per child. We're spending $694,000 per child per term, per year, when you would pay comparably this amount in the private sector. So we're spending nearly twice as much as the school fees of private education now for a child who goes to public school. This is a commitment of this government. That represents the commitment of our government to educating our children. This is where we are today. And it is double what APNU had in the last year, more than double the last year they spent there on the sector. This metric is an important metric globally because that's how they assess a country's commitment to the education sector. Now, the second thing is the allocation in 2012, we had a teacher. If you take the teacher per children ratio, per child ratio, you would find out that in 2012, it was 23.16. Today, overall, it's 12.69 overall. So what happens is that you take the total number of students, 180,000, and divide it just around 180,000. It's 178, I think, somewhere. I'm rounding up. So the numbers, but we did the exact numbers here. So I'm just giving you the round. And you divide the number of students by the number of teachers we have. So we pay over 14,000 teachers on our payroll. That's on the payroll. It works out to 12.69 per teacher. For every 12.69 students, we have 1 teacher. It used to be in 2012, for every 23 students, we have 1 teacher. So how does this number stand up globally? It's better than the United States and 156 other countries, including the average for many European countries. Teacher-student ratio. That shows a commitment to hiring people in the sector. Now people say, this might be too much. Just imagine we go back to, say, 20. Say 20, which is the average for developing countries is like 30 students per teacher. We're down to 12. So assuming we go back, you can effectively reduce your teaching complement by half to go back up to those ratios. Not that we want to go there, but I'm just giving you an idea. That means you could have probably doubled salaries. But we have now smaller classrooms. But many teachers across this country may still be teaching big classes. Big classes, but why is that happening? And I think it's time now to examine why some of these things are happening. Because from our records now, what was recently given to us a couple of days ago, that 70% on a daily basis, only 70% of our teachers show up to work. So it means that 4,228 teachers of the 14,000 don't show up daily, because only 70% show up to work. I know if you have 14,000 and 70% of 14,000 show up. So we have to examine this carefully, because we're hearing about 6,000 teachers striking now. But if 70% or 4,228 don't show up on a daily basis, then there is a big problem, because the state is investing more, it's paying for the teachers, it's putting in a huge sum of public money into health, the education sector for teachers, and what's happening? Many may not show up. And then the distribution is also a problem, because some regions have lower ratios and others higher ratios, and we need to examine this. But clearly, why am I giving you all of this statistic now? Is to show a strong commitment on the part of the government to put in the effort, to make an effort to change the sector and to give our children the best education. But we now need to look at what happens in the sector itself, whether we are getting value for money. This is an important thing. The ratios for primary school, secondary school teachers per student would be different. I didn't go through, I have the disaggregated figure, but I think I made the core point, which is a massive change from 2012 to now on teachers-student ratio, and largely because of our commitment. We hired, since we got back into office, over 2,000 teachers more we added to the complement of the existing number of teachers. Over 2,000 additional teachers because of our commitment to delivering a quality education in this sector, and we'll continue to do this. These are key points that I wish to make sure that people understand. Now, I can go on about what we indicated. The next thing we said is that we wanted to ensure a better quality education. So I have the numbers. If you look at the number of teachers, we have trained in the last, so we have the numbers of teachers, you've seen it, the complement, over 14,000, low student-teacher ratio. But how are we going to now get the quality up? So first of all, people ask, why is it that we publish the graduate teachers alone and the changes? You will see since we got into office, they say we call for 50% increase in 2015. And teachers have gotten from the 2015 level more than the 50% increase. But under this government alone, graduate teachers have gotten about 33 to 35% increase since we got into office, the skilled teachers. And what's the objective here? The objective has been to ensure that more and more of our teachers go into the skill category, so we have better quality education. In 2 years, in the years we've been in office, we have graduated from CPC over 3,000 teachers. Over 3,000 teachers we have graduated from CPC. And in the last 2 years alone, maybe 3,000 teachers from CPC. The training, massive amounts of money in the budget for training of teachers. As you train and you go up, the salaries start getting better. And that is why we focused on that. And secondly, through the GOAL program, we have over 4,000 teachers who have finished GOAL or on the GOAL program. If you look at the two combined, that will be nearly 6,000 to 7,000 teachers who have benefited from training or are on the GOAL program, from training under this government, on part of a program paid by the government of Ghana. And the moment they hit that threshold, the moment they start getting degrees, etc., you see they start getting the salaries start becoming higher. That's where we want to go. And that is why we're encouraging higher increases at the top. Now, what about the bottom? Teachers, we did a survey of the private banks, and their entry level for person with 5 subject CXC is like between 90,000 to 120,000. That is the banks. And when you come in, the teachers at the lowest level, even the aide, they're above 90,000 at that level. So it's competitive with the banking sector, but we don't want people to remain there. We want them to be trained, and we are providing the opportunity for them to be trained to grow higher. That is our plan. So massive allocation of resources in the budget to the sector, improvement of working conditions, improvement of salaries, providing more opportunities for training and a higher pay at the upper end of the scale, so it encourages people to train. This has been a clear-cut plan for the education sector. And so this is an important component. People say, oh, we left out the people, junior people. It was clear. At the lower level, the salary at the entry level is very competitive for this qualification, 5 CXCs. And a number of people don't even have 5 CXCs. But I would say that the salary is competitive there. And secondly, we want them to not stay there, to train constantly. All of our teachers, everybody, we're encouraging all of our people, like the 20-something thousand who are now, that's not part of this budget, the 21,000 who are on the GOAL scholarship that APNU says they would shut down and it's a waste of time. So you can see the emphasis on education and the spending on education. As I said before, I don't want to go on APNU's record about who got scholarships and how the teachers were dealt with. That's a different matter. So we have established already that the strike is political. We've established that. And teachers are being misled. And a lot of them are made. Now, there are some teachers who you may not be able to convince because they may have sympathies with a particular political party. But there are lots of teachers who are striking who are being misled. And those are the teachers that I want to ask them to look at some of the facts that I'm going to talk about now. And also the media, because this media here is very selective. I'm speaking generally. They would never scrutinize these agencies that handle public funds often, their state of affairs. Every day it's about government. Every day it's about government. They would give a free pass to certain individuals. So consider the following if it's not time to scrutinize from the media's perspective the records of these agencies. The Teachers Union has collected billions of dollars in the last 30 years. Billions of dollars in dues from their membership. Billions of dollars. The last audited statement that they submitted to the Auditor General was 1989. 89. Think about that. If not 10 years ago, Since 1989, they have not had any of their accounts audited. The Constitution of the Teachers Union says that at the annual meeting, they have to name the auditors, the internal auditors, and they have to get their accounts submitted to the Auditor General. They violated their Constitution and probity. They failed to submit in how many years? 30-something years now. Which is an obligation of the union. So we don't know how they spent the money in 30 years. 30 years. But the media will never look at this. It came up briefly. This teachers union has been spending billions of dollars without it. Now they have an obligation under the Trade Union Act to submit to the registrar every year financial statements, not even audited accounts, financial statements. The last time they submitted financial statements was 2004. So they can be struck off from the register of trade unions now, because that's one of your obligations, is to submit this to be considered an active trade union. So 20 years now they've failed to submit even financial statements. Forget audited accounts. They just have to put together the records and submit it there. They didn't do that for 20 years, this teachers union. They have, anywhere in the world, they would have already been struck off. The membership would have been in uproar, but because a cabal runs this union, a cabal, they keep people out, and then they bribed others because they took stay quiet, basically. And through the duty-free concession that they had, that they were using liberally for some of their, for people who supported them, to keep them quiet about this. Now, is it not time now that in a free country with a free media that is so aggressive on accountability, to say to a union, where are your accounts? For 30 years, why have they not been audited? How much money did you collect? The billions you collected, where did it go? Why are you violating your own constitution? That you have to do this. But trust me, that question will never get asked. They will never get asked. They'll come after the government for 1 year's record didn't go in on time for the maybe to the parliament, you get asked 100 questions. But here, they collected teachers' money. And this is not, somehow people think deduction. This is teachers' money that they're paying handing over to the union for representation. So this is important. They could now be struck off the register. Not that we are advocating that, because I think it shouldn't happen, but they have a duty now to account for this money. And we have seen them, a number of teachers have called us and say, if we don't strike, we're already told we've run afoul of the union. We'll not get our duty-free concession process, because that's how it was in the past. You had the concessions we gave, this government, not APNU, 100 teachers per year getting a duty-free concession that they never had in the past, that they got under the PPP government. And now we have extended it to even deputy teachers who have not gotten it once, but are within 3 years of retirement, so it will be much more. We handed it to the union to administer, and they use it politically, and also, in my view, corruptly, because I've heard a number of people who have sold these concessions. So I want to say to the teachers who are worried about that and who have called, who are working, that they're not administering this anymore. We made it clear that the government will administer it. So you don't have to worry about the union not accepting this or discriminating against you, because they do that a lot. They do that a lot in the union. You've seen Coretta McDonald lie to the people of this country. We have her on record saying, I don't collect money from Parliament. I collect only teacher's salary. It's not true. It's a blatant lie. How would a person, a leader of a union, not know that we will check? And there's a public record. The people in Parliament must know if you're collecting your salary there in Parliament. She collects the teacher's salary and as an MP, and lied on camera just a couple days ago about this. Secondly, the racism. Now, teachers, we have mixed teachers. We have Amerindian teachers. We have Indo-Guyanese teachers. We have Afro-Guyanese teachers. They're the teachers of our country. These are our people. We have to work for all of them. They take care of our children. And we have to respect them, all of them. They do a great job. And so she tries to make it about racism, like what a pattern. She says we're punishing them because they're Afro-Guyanese. But you have teachers of every race in the teaching profession. So that is something we will not countenance. And the racism and the quiet circles. And therefore, the agency shop, that was a courtesy that was done by the government, was withdrawn. And because imagine we might be very complicit in the fact that we are transferring money every month to them, deducted from teachers, and they're not accounting for the money. But there's a court decision by Ian Chang. So that is why I want to read you what Chang concluded, Chief Justice Chang. He said, in respect to the deduction of union dues in particular, the government of Guyana was merely acting as the agent of the union for the purpose of withholding and remitting such dues to the union. The withdrawal of such agency service by the government of Guyana did not mean that such dues were not collectible. It merely meant that the GPSU was tasked with collecting such dues itself. As such, unlike the case of agency fees, if the plaintiff union suffered any financial loss, it was on account of its own inaction. This was when the case was between the GPSU and the government of Ghana at that time. So I seen they have said that they're going to make alternate arrangements to collect their dues, and that's fine. Now, Coretta McDonald said the government can withdraw, don't need to pay for the days that we strike. They're welcome to withdraw it. Not to withdraw it, but not pay for the days that the teachers are striking. And that's part of the industrial action too. You don't get paid for days that you don't work. So the monthly salary for teachers, it runs into billions of dollars. It's about $2.7 billion for teachers, maybe 2.8. So the weekly salary is about 680 million or so, crude numbers. Half of that will be about 300, maybe 300 and something million dollars. So the teachers, they said that 50% of the teachers are striking, 60% they said. Assuming it's only 50%, because the numbers, we don't believe the numbers, but assuming it's 50%. So now they said they will pay strike relief. So strike relief, a weekly pay for our teachers would be $600 odd million. Half of that, 50% of that will be $300 odd million. So I hope that at the end of this week, or when we deduct, that they will pay the $300 and something million dollars to the teachers per week. That Coretta, because she speaks about our corporate sponsors. And that should raise a lot of questions. If you have a corporate sponsor, how do they pay you? By check, or is it by cash? It raises more questions. Who do they pay the money for? Because I gather the union leadership don't know who they're talking about. So it's Coretta McDonald. How do we know that if they collect cash, that it's all collected and some is not funneled to Congress Place or to people's pockets? It is it's so not transparent that I am surprised that nobody has pressed her on this. What's your mode of collecting this money? Is it paid through the bank? Is it through a check from the corporate sponsors? Is it in a cash? Who knows about it? How do you account for this money? How do the teachers know it? So the teachers, she said they have enough money to pay strike relief for the long term. But the strike relief for 50% teachers, if they claim that striking, just 50% is $340 odd million per week. And so she needs to pay that money per week now. So I hope when the teachers ask them, I remember one other union leader who was like this, and when the people showed up at that time, he ran away. He ran away from them and hid for months when they asked for the money. So I hope by now you would understand that we believe that we are taking steps to address the education sector in a manner that will bring benefits to our people. We're providing more opportunities for our teachers and people across this country to study, to get better educated. As I told you already, nearly 6,000 odd teachers have been trained or are training since we got into office. And more than doubling of the sector allocation in terms of dollars. We've restored the children's grant, all of that sort of stuff, spending more on textbooks, better working conditions, etc. And salaries have increased significantly, particularly at the graduate and other levels, because we want to have people grow up. So I have demonstrated our commitment. We'll keep working to improve the conditions of the teachers across this country. They play an important role, but we are not going to be part of a political plot by the opposition that they did practically nothing when they were in office for the teachers and now come and shed crocodile tears. They shed crocodile tears on this matter. And I hope by now you would see that the people who are calling this strike, that they have so many skeletons in their cupboard. They've been running down this union. This is an unaccountable union by any standards. Under the Trade Union Act, the executive members who fail to submit records to the trade union can be fined by the court. They have not done that. They now could be convicted and fined by the courts of Guyana for the illegal acts that they have perpetrated. But nobody pays attention. I bet nobody has checked the Trade Union Act from now, and I hope the media will do it, or their constitution, and ask why you're breaching your own constitution. So, as I said before, we continue to work to ensure that our children have the best quality care. And I pointed out we are not going to be distracted, basically, by the frills. So Norton now Norton and Cathy Hughes. Imagine Cathy Hughes, a great mathematician. Now she is telling us how we can find money, 4 days of oil money and all of that, that could be used to pay teachers and all of that. The same person who was awarding contracts in our own ministry, signing checks for our own company, clearing invoices as minister for our own company, telling us now how to deal with teachers. They had 5 years. 5 years. And there, you recall what Keith Scott said, teachers are heartless, careless. I don't even remember the word, because he is prone to really let out what the government really felt. Amerindians were greedy, teachers were useless, basically. That was what he was saying on the afternoon. So, nobody should pay any attention to Cathy Hughes. They said, oh, teachers are not the oil money. We're not getting enough of the oil money too. This is the mantra. So I pointed out at the last press conference that Norton identified 5 areas in for priority action on his so-called people-centered development strategy. You recall that? And the 5 areas that he said would be his priority. Now, in this budget, 800 billion of the 1.1 trillion are allocated to those 5 areas. So clearly he doesn't read much or doesn't understand much what he reads. And I gather he has his sidekick there all the time doing everything for him, even thinking for him. But let's take, for example, this year's budget. Even with a revised formula, with a revised NRF formula, so about $300 billion will come to the budget this year from oil proceeds. So oil money, for all of our purposes this year, is $300 billion. We have a budget of $1.1 trillion. So what's the difference? $800 billion. That's financed from revenue, which is $400 billion non-oil revenue. And then some domestic borrowing and financing for the big projects like the gas to energy project from abroad. So take $300 billion is the oil money in the budget this year. How much are we allocating to education? $135 billion. How much to healthcare? $130 billion. So in these 2 sectors alone, education and health alone, that's $265 billion, and we're receiving in the budget this year $300 billion for oil money. And they said, oh, we're not spending oil money back on our people. Only these 2 sectors. Let's forget that now. So it's $300 billion again, right, we have in the budget. How much money is for public service wages bill? So this is the central government wage bill, $121 billion. How much money for pensions? $48 billion for pension this year. That's $150 billion there. So that's half of all the oil money that goes only to pension and public service wages. Half of all the oil money. So it's not unlimited amount of oil money. The oil money is what we have in the budget. It's $300 billion, even with the revised formula. Even with the revised formula. And by the way, I think I misspoke last week. I said it's 10 years that Norway had, because somebody called me, and it was 10 years that after Norway started producing oil that they set up their natural resources fund. It's actually 19 years. 19 years after Norway started producing oil. They discovered oil in 1967, started producing about 1970, 1971, and established 19 years thereafter their fund to save. That means they spent all of the money back in the country on their people, and they already had a higher standard of living than we had. But these, our bright technicians, these intellectuals that we have here, they want us to save all the money, and they want us to spend all the money at the same time. Spend all of it. Hand it out on wages and salaries. Let's eat everything up. Forget, don't build no roads or nothing else. Eat everything up and then save all of it at the same time. That's what they argue. If you listen to it, I'm sorry, I'm saying it so crudely, but this is what a sensible person would conclude. Norton and the others, they schizophrenia, full-fledged schizophrenia, split personalities. You don't know which one would show up any day in Parliament. Like one shows up in Parliament and the next day they show up elsewhere and says something totally contradictory. And they don't see the glaring contradictions. I don't want to say it's hypocrisy, not to say I'm the hypocritiest person today at his press conference. So I heard I'm the hypocritiest person, right? But he's a cesspool of contradictions. So the thing is that this is what we hear all the time. Oh, where the all money gone? Where the all money gone? And I'm just pointing out that only just over 20% of the budget is financed from oil money. And if you look at it that way. So we see, so today they were talking about, they're great economists, about how, at press conference Norton had, how they can save money from the different sectors. So what are the sectors they identified? It just came to me late, so we just had a quick look. So take, for example, print, and Mahipal was saying, I don't know if it's Mahipal or Norton, but one of them was saying we could save a lot of money from print and non-print material because the budget has grown for that significantly. So it's true that the budget grew from, say, 2019, 1.7 billion. It's now $4.6 billion. But let's look at the growth from 2014 to 2019 to 2020. It's about $600 million. And in our case, it's about $2.9 billion. But of the $2.9 billion, $2.5 billion is for textbooks for our children. So in effect, you had print and non-print material growing by less than $100 million a year for the four years or so that we've presented these budgets. But you would never see that because we must cut out the $2.5 billion, the money we set aside to buy textbooks for our children, to satisfy Mahipal or Norton. The same thing with cut fuel and lubricants. Now the fact is that they didn't do work on drainage and irrigation in the country. So the budget grew because we are now spending money back on drainage and irrigation. So you have an increase in fuel costs there. But so we stopped that and let the trenches collapse again and the drainage and irrigation system for agriculture, and just let it fall apart again. They said, let's on refreshments and stuff like dietary, let's cut back the dietary. Now remember, my point was they grew dietary in a major way. You remember ministers, all the ministers had signing things at all of the hotels. They could just go and eat and sign there. Well, that's not what we set aside the money for. The growth is because we've expanded the school feeding program under dietary, not for ministers to eat, but for our children to have more meals in school. That's where we're putting the money in, not the ministers. And I see they started looking at the salary, how much people are getting now. I hope they do it for for Ramjatan and Nagamutu, they had no portfolio, and you would see the benefits that they were getting. It hasn't changed much. We cut out a lot of ministerial benefits like insurance, private insurance for healthcare and all of that sort of stuff. So if you look at these clowns, they went today at a press conference and said, cut all of these things. We can get some more money. So you're cutting out the school feeding program for the children, money on D&I, you're cutting out the textbooks for the children. So this is how they're going to save. This is something. So Norton goes along and he says, oh, it's corruption too. They are spending money in Camberville and Kitty. Kitty, I think, paving the roads there in North Georgetown here, the stuff like that, where it's Kingston and Albertown and Queenstown, because he's seen some work being done there. And then we are building a 4-lane highway on the East Coast. We already awarded the contract, and now we are paving the road. It's a waste of money now because we awarded the contract, and the contract, they would build a new road there. So it's a waste of money, and it's all to corruption. Well, every road that has been paved in Kingston, in Albertown, in Kitty, and in Queenstown, and other parts of the city too, going to happen. It's done by the ministry's own capability, force account. It's not a private contractor. If Norton had chosen to find that out, he would see it's done by the ministry itself with their own equipment. So his point about private contractor, then this man is so lazy, absolutely so lazy. He said, we awarded a 4-lane road and we are paving it now. Now we are paving the road from the Kitty roundabout right down to where the new road started by Better Hope. That piece has deteriorated on both sides, but that's not where we awarded the contract. The man said we awarded a contract to build a 4-lane road, and they would have to, it's a waste of money now, corruption. The contract has been awarded for the 4-lane on the railway embankment. This man is so lazy, he wouldn't even read something of that nature. And he goes to talk, it's corruption now. And it's being done not by a private contractor. Guess who's paving it? It's the ministry's own equipment that's paving it now. So, lazy, lazy guy. He doesn't even pay attention to what's going on. He said, I don't talk about inflation and high cost of living. I talk about that all the time. I talk not only about high cost of living, I pointed out inflation globally, how we have addressed inflation, how we have managed to mitigate inflation and get lower rates than many other countries that around the world. I pointed out about subsidies to water, electricity. I pointed out about the large subsidy for fuel that we give so that everybody benefits. Anyone who uses gasoline or diesel in the country, they benefited. I pointed out the change to the freight rate that we use in calculation of the taxes as the base through the CIF value. I pointed out about the cash assistance that we've given to people. Hundreds of issues. He said, I don't talk about that. He is thing. And then he says, I know the PVP people pay to come to Congress Place and protest in collaboration with someone who purports to be a member. And it was to distract from the strike. Congress would be held, preparations are ongoing. Now, Mr. Norton, let me tell him this. I have no interest in sending people to protest at Congress Place. It's his own membership. The PNC people who are aggrieved. So they have different camps. You have Amanza fighting for this leadership, God help us. And the Rosedale Ford and Norton and everything else. You think Norton is bad? You should look at them, attempt to calculate something, don't. So he has his own internal problem. I didn't even know a protest took place in front of Congress Place. He blames the PPP. We sent people there. He should better find out, and along with one of their members, his member. So we are now protesting there in front of Congress Place. Norton, we have nothing to do with it. You got to fix your own problems, bro. You're in big trouble. So if you have trouble there, don't try to paint us with that brush. You deal with your own problem. That's what I want to deal with in Norton. I'm not going to pay attention to the other thing. It's just hopeless and just a repetition. And then one last thing I deal with, it's a continued lies by Kaichor News all the time, but it's just disgusting that a reporter could write something like this. I don't know, the reporter who wrote this is just useless. So they said Jagdeo blames volatile oil prices for not increasing public servants' wages by 50%, but disregards concept while racking up debt. So this got to be an extremely dumb person who wrote this. Because they asked me, the Kaichor News asked, how do you link the NRF formula to price volatility? And I said, the two have nothing, they're not correlated. That volatility in prices are driven by a number of factors. And I explain what those are. But generally, the general law is supply and demand that drives price movements. And anything that affects or that's disruptive to either supply or demand, you can have serious volatilities. That's what I was saying. So I said, in spite of the volatility, it has nothing to do with the formula, because the formula is based on bands and percentages that will go to the Treasury from in each band of receipts that you get of oil proceeds. So if you get $1 billion because of volatile oil prices, then let's say low oil prices, then the formula doesn't change. The formula is applied to the 1 billion, and then you get a percentage of that going to the budget. If the oil prices escalate or drop, the formula will not change. It will be applied to the receipt. So there is no causal link or any direct link between the formula and volatility. Volatility is a different thing. So then I explain also that our debt numbers are among the lowest in the world. I gave the figures for the United States of America. I gave the figures for the G20 countries. I gave the figures for the G7 countries. And I pointed out that both the servicing of the debt and the stock of the debt in relation to GDP, we have some of the lowest figures and therefore most sustainable. And then they said, I said that Jagdeo blames volatile oil prices for not increasing public service wages by 50%. And say that, and so this is pure conjecture. It's a very cheap form of journalism. Not that I expect better there, but I just had to take this one out so that people will see exactly what they do. They just distort things totally, and not just distort minimally. Just reconstruct something. It's either they don't understand or reconstruct it in a wicked way. And this is what I think happened here. Thank you. Yes, please.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo and Ask Williams Kaiser News. Just a few quick questions from me. Firstly, on the oil sector in relation to the gas to energy project, it seems like government is getting a hard time securing the loan for the gas project. Firstly, do you believe that this is due to the fact that there is no proof that the project is the cheapest and cleanest way to meet Guyana's energy demands? And secondly, we saw that the GCCI is also lobbying to the US Exim Bank for that loan. Did government basically put the GCCI up to that? And moving over to the non-oil sector, we on the issue of the teachers. Sorry, you keep comparing APNU to PPP. I don't see the relevance. However, the money that this government has...
I did not. That's why I said I'm not going to go into the record today.
They were minor...
Your question obviously was prepared before I said that.
They were minor comparisons.
Okay. Minor comparisons, all right.
Still comparisons.
Let's deal with the minor questions then. Adjust the questions appropriately.
Based on publicly available information, you live alone and don't have kids. Mm-hmm. Can you live on $85,000 per month? Secondly, as leader of a party that boasts of being a friend of the working class, how do you feel scrapping the agency shop agreement with the GTU and also refusing to engage in collective bargaining with the union? Thirdly, how do you reconcile propping up a failing sugar industry with multi-billion allocations but refusing to pay teachers a better salary? Why does your party and its sympathizers always resort to nasty mudslinging when persons do not agree with you, as evidenced by the insults being meted out to GTU General Secretary Ms. McDonald and other teachers? Is your government open to returning to the table in collective bargaining with the union to both end this strike and meet their needs? Does it concern you that large numbers of teachers from your party's stronghold have come... Pardon me?
Yeah, that's a PNC question, so let her read it out. Go. Read.
Thank you.
Read the whole
have
thing.
Come out against you during this strike.
What is the last one?
Does it concern you that large numbers of teachers from your party's stronghold have come out against you during this strike? Vice President Jagdeo, while in opposition, you had stated that you hoped the unions would bargain with the government for at least 50% increase in wages. Sir, now that your party is in government, do you still uphold that position that the unions should bargain for a 50% increase?
Yeah, so let me see where we start. So once again, the gas to energy project. The gas to energy project. The gas to energy project will be built. The gas to energy project will be built. It is a commitment we made, and in spite of every attempt by Kiteshore News, by Glenn Lal, by everyone else, the APNU, to kill this project, it's not going to succeed. We have great relations with the US Exim Bank. We've had bipartisan support on this loan. You think a few people, loonies, like Kiteshore News, Glenn Lal, or the others who've been trying to block this project. You think that the people who did an assessment of this project in the US are as stupid as they are? They're not. They come down here, the project economics, the greatest. In fact, if a private person were to build this project, they will jump at it because the economics of the project is so good. Excepting, you recall the Glenn Lal issue about solar energy being cheaper, 3 cents per kilowatt hour. Up to now, he's hiding. So that project will go forward. We'll get the loan. I was asked last week, what happens if you don't get the loan? I said, we have a contingency plan in place. But as far as I see, the loan is moving forward. We've had a great technical working relationship with the Exim Bank. And we don't need the to lobby the GCCI because you're disparaging should I say that the drug dealers are putting Glenlal up to what he's doing? Or because we want to expose him because he killed someone, that is why he is so angry against the PPP government? Or we wouldn't allow him to be corrupt? You just said that we put GCCI up to write this letter. This is the disparaging view that you have, but it comes directly out of Congress Place and the warped mind of Glenlal. It's not as though GCCI doesn't want for their membership to have cheaper electricity because they're manufacturers. They have a vested interest in this project. They want the project to go forward because their membership would have cheaper electricity, which will make them more profitable. They can export. The people of this country would save $100 million to every year from this project alone, leaving out what we will save as a country. So it's going forward. Now, whether I could live on 80, I don't have much expenses. You're right. I don't have much expenses myself. And whether I live alone or not, that's my business. I'm not going to tell Kaicho News my business, or whether I have children or not, based on information in the public domain. But that's my business.
The third question is,
Yes. So I'm coming to the $85,000. So now, no teacher. If not, then let's pay everyone $500,000. If that's the living wage, take every cent that we have in the budget, because that's the kind of planning that will come out of APNU and bankrupt the country, so that 4 generations later, not 4, but 3 generations later, we're still struggling from their debt. When they did exactly the same thing in the 70s, when the bauxite prices and sugar prices were high, 3 times what they are today, they ate every cent of it out. And borrowed to where our debt in 1990 was higher external debt than what it is today. I explained that. On a 300 million economy, and we have a 22 billion economy now. And the debt was higher in nominal terms. Forget real terms. So we are never going to practice that kind of economics. Why not just have any agency? Why not just pay everybody what their salary is in the US, in this country? Why not pay everybody what their salary is in the US? Because your revenue has to sustain it for it to be in a long-term way, to be sustainable. And countries are got to manage for sustainability. That's how we are. We don't have the same philosophy like some of the others. If that's the case, I would hope that you are getting $500,000 from Glenlal and the others, that you pay whatever is necessary. Forget whatever revenue his papers make. So the thing is that a living wage has to go, a wage policy has to grow in accordance with affordability. That's what we keep trying to drum in people's head. Especially, most people understand that, except the Kaichonos. Now, the sugar workers are the whipping horse because of racism. Racism. When APNU, if we had terminated 7,000 workers who are mainly Afro-Guyanese, in any time in this government, under the PPP government, everybody would be up in their arms. Everyone would be up in arms. But that happened under APNU, and nobody pays attention to it. Contrast the experience with the bauxite industry, how we treated bauxite workers in all of the areas, how we treated the public service. You know, the irony of it is that they say, oh, that this government has ethnically cleansed the public service, and then say simultaneously that we are punishing the public service because it's mainly Afro-Guyanese. That's the contradiction. We have ethnically cleansed it, but we are now punishing it because it's mainly Afro-Guyanese. it's not only, it's disingenuous. But they can say this because they have some like-minded people constantly pushing the racism line. They can't come out of it. So sugar workers have been the whipping horse. There was a time when sugar revenue was nearly half of total revenue in this country, and the country lived on it. At that time, through the sugar levy. Have you ever heard about the sugar levy? That sustained the country when all the other sectors were falling apart. You should go back and look at the sugar levy when it sustained. Nobody spoke about that. You didn't, I just sat here and said, we're giving $5 billion in subsidy to the sugar industry this year in the budget. But we have over $4.5 billion to subsidize electricity in Linden and Kwakwani, and not a word about that. So that they will pay cheaper rates. We are paying their electricity bill. You take $4.5 billion and you divide it by the number of people who live in these areas, and you will see what's the per capita allocation they're getting. It runs over to $300,000 per person that they're getting from the Treasury. We're not giving that to the sugar workers, every sugar worker, $300,000. They're working and they're not getting that. So that's the racism. Now what you raise there is pure racism. It's always bringing in sugar workers. The mudslinging, I thought it's the Coretta McDonald who's been doing a lot of mudslinging. They're putting out all kinds of things about Priya Manikchan handbag, everyday racism. What's worse mudslinging and vileness than racism? Promoting racism in our country. That's the mudslinging. I've substantiated everything that I said about McDonald here. I've said, first of all, she lied. She lied saying, you have it, unless you haven't seen it. I'm sure you saw it. She lied on camera saying she's collecting only a teacher's salary. And the fact is that she collected both the teacher's salary and from Parliament. She's collecting a salary from Parliament. Did I do the mudslinging? She lied. She got exposed. She got exposed. She and the membership, they are not. How many years has she been the leader of the union? All those years, not a single year has she produced audited statements or even filed the financial statements with the registrar. For all those years, where did the money that they collected from the workers go? The billions that they collected. That's mudslinging. They just don't want the tough questions asked. That is precisely. That's not mudslinging. The agency shop, it's quite clear. We're not going to support anyone who tries to divide our people by race. We said, you're entitled to collect as per the ruling of Ian Chang. I read it to you. You are entitled to collect your dues, collect them. They said they would collect them through some money collection agency. That's fine, they can collect their dues. But we're withdrawing the agency shop. This was a courtesy that the government had with the union. And so if you look at the nastiness in Parliament too, the same Coretta McDonald you were speaking about, you should go and look at the Parliament. She made a mess of the presentation. She didn't know anything about the sector, if you look at her performance in Parliament. And that could be substantiated too. So the collective bargaining, the 50%, as I said before in 2015, we said that they should meet with the teachers. First of all, meet with the teachers. Coretta was, as I told you already, coming over to my office. I can't get a meeting with them. It's not, forget the 50%. They couldn't even meet. They withdrew the 100 duty-free concessions. They weren't getting the 100 that we gave to the teachers' union. I was pushing for them to just have a meeting with the union. This union has been meeting regularly with the people. You've seen the list of 27 items that they was put out by Mr. Saddam, put out recently, that was published in the Stabroek News. How we have moved things forward, try to address the concerns about over 60% of the demands. And these are not wages demand alone, they are non-wages. I had, as president, sat with them and given them an allocation every year to do housing for teachers. The money is still sitting in the account. The money is sitting in the account. Every year, the government would give the pay over to the account a sum of money for housing for teachers. Never moved because they couldn't snatch that money. That would have had to be accounted for. So they were not too interested. Housing we dealt with duty-free, a number of other things. You just look at that list. We've sat with them. They've had more engagement with us and more issues addressed by us, if you just read that list, than they did under APNU. And I pointed out the wages increase alone in those categories, so nearly 35% in the 4 years we've been in office. So conceivably, it would be close to 50% in the 5 years. Conceivably, it would be close to that. So I have great credibility in this area because of what work we did with the teachers, and we continue to demonstrate here. I've demonstrated with numbers here. So this is all, the reason I spent this time going through this, because I wouldn't normally with Kaichor News, the vindictiveness here, because this is purely out of APNU. It is almost the vile thing. You know, they don't deal with analysis of the numbers. Look at what I just said before, cost per student, etc. They'd go back to the same file thing, sugar workers. Oh, you're all spending too much on sugar workers. Wouldn't say a word about the scholarships. They're the ones, and people of every race benefiting from this. This is the undoing of APNU, the attempt, the racism. And they're not gonna survive because we'd fight it with every fiber of our being, the racism that APNU has, for all of our people. That's the only way forward. Yes?
Dr. Jagdeo.
And Dennis was ahead, or you want him to go? All right, okay.
Mr. Jagdeo, specifically on the gas to show project, have you got any clear indications from the XMAC when exactly they will
We
give us approval?
anticipate it will go in the second quarter of this year. Of this year.
And what is wrong with collectively bargaining with the union on salaries? Let them submit proposals, you look at them, you
Frankly
exchange.
speaking, now that I've had chance to go through in great detail where the state of the union, sometimes you're busy and you don't look. I accuse the media of doing that, but we too didn't pay enough attention. With this state of affairs, these are not credible. This is not a credible body anymore. This is not a credible body. This seems to be a corrupt body and a political unit. Would you sit down with somebody who since 1989 has not submitted? You collect money for them, they get billions of dollars, and from the teachers, the people they represent, and who wouldn't account for it for 30 years. It's something else now should be done. When people argue for collective bargaining, they must also be accountable. And secondly, when people come with political demands, they didn't acknowledge the working relationship. We met with them, we worked through. How do you think those 60 items came up? The 60%, and you saw the long list. I hope you read it. It was in the Starbuck News. Those are substantive things. Not everything has to be about wages. Can be about training of teachers. Can be about scholarships for teachers. It should be about housing for teachers. Teachers also in this country are part of our society. They get house lots. This money we spent, the $100 billion that we'll spend on housing, they would also benefit from that, they and their extended families. The roads we build in the communities would also help teachers. When we build a power plant, it also helps teachers because the electricity prices come down. It's not just about wages and salaries. It's working conditions in the sector and overall investment and progress in the country. So, yes, generally collective bargaining, but I believe now In fact, I'm going to urge that we pay closer attention to the state of some of these bodies when they come in and they claim to be working in the interests of their members, but they're working in the interests of small cabals, as the teachers union has demonstrated.
So now are you,
And they gas the energy. Well, I said I dealt with that. Yes.
so effectively, are you ruling out collective
No,
bargaining?
no,
with
no.
the
I'm not
union
ruling
as-
out anything. I'm saying we must pay closer attention. The sectors that have to engage in this have to pay closer attention to the objective of these bodies, whether it's industrial or political, and secondly, whether they are credible and they represent the teachers.
But Mr. Jagdeo, when you look at the cost of living out there, clearly things have gone up. I mean, you're pointing.
But this is a generic thing. We can go all day long. Things have gone up in all around the Caribbean, but our wages increase have outstripped every Caribbean country. In fact, some of our wages are competitive at the upper end now with what people were getting paid in those regions. And you know, in the early days where they were way ahead of us. Way ahead of us. We have caught up with most of the regional countries in the skill category. We've caught up with them in terms of remuneration. So you got to look at it in that as a continuum, and also in the context of long-term sustainability. Long-term sustainability. I already pointed out that wages and salaries and pension, two recurrent expenditure, are 50% of all of the oil and gas proceeds in this year's budget. Should we put it 100% and do nothing else? Don't use it for anything else. That's the judgment, Dennis, where you have to make when you're in government. Sometimes it's important. We have to invest in other things too. In the long run, that will help. Would help people. I just pointed out.
Penultimate question. Sir, your administration is being accused of really treating, for instance, GAU with kids' gloves whenever the workers go on strike compared to other unions. Example, the GTU. They're basically getting a sledgehammer from the government in response to what some of the teachers say are
GAU,
legitimate
listen,
needs.
if you want to be fair to the sugar workers and people who are fair in this country, you would look at the 5 years of APNU. 5 years of APNU, 7,000 of them lost their jobs. They didn't even want to pay the severance. They had to go to court for their severance. A minister said, we can't give them their severance because they'll spend it out. Now, that severance is not dependent on the minister. You know, when you work, you have to get that by law. They deny them severance. 2, they remove the API. That's gone. Thirdly, they got 0 increase for all 5 years of APNU. No salary increase for 5 years. Where was the collective outrage? Where was this outrage? 0 for 5 years. Their salaries, when PPP left office, they had a salary. And when we came back to office 5 years later, that was the same salary they had in the industry. Where was this outrage? So you're talking from, and then the government boasted, oh, we give a 79% increase in public service. Is that not shameful and disgusting in a country that's trying to move with all of our people forward? It's not the worst act of discrimination. This is what it is. And people should be outraged about that instead of using sugar workers now as every time we spend a cent on it. There is a difference too. That's a company. Gaisuco deals with it as a company. This is central government dealing with the teachers or the public servants. So there are two different things. The company versus the central government. So it's like GAIL deals with their own workers. SUCO deals with its workers. Every other agency. So that's a next difference here. But if you look at the wages at that level, people who go out and work hours and hours in the field, they're way below what public servants get even at the junior level. Some sugar workers who go in the fields, they get less than what an office assistant would make. And so because of this big act of discrimination by APNU that this country shamefully stayed silent on because of racism by some people. Racism, shamefully. We got to work for all of our people. And that's what we're doing every cent. When we put back the children's grant, it went to all of our children. The pensioners, all of them are getting the money. Public assistance, everybody. The scholarships to all of our people. You look at the numbers, you look at the ethnicity of the people who are benefiting. Because we work for our people. And our people is not only those who support the PPP, for the country. Cheerful. When they sent home those 2,000 Amerindians and took away $700 million from those villages, APNU did that. Where was this big outcry? The pure discrimination. And this country works with double standards. So now I'm being asked about sugar workers. What happened in those 5 years? Their base never changed. Their base salary. If they get 10% now, and normally they get the same 6.5%, like 6.5%, but on a base that was effectively a base that never changed for 5 years.
Aren't you worried that the strike can widen with solidarity from other unions that have workers in the government?
I'm not worried, but I know that workers are being encouraged. We've had 2 cases where we've known that the leadership of some unions have been consulting with the PNC to try to get workers from other areas to go. We'd have to deal with it. We'll deal with it if people want to move politically. APNU is a party that has no plan for this country. This is typical. Disruptive, no vision, no plan. Their playbook is known to me. I've dealt with this for donkey years, really. Their playbook is clear about doing this, creating industrial disruption, hoping that some people, they asked me about, the Kaichor news, that some people, pro-PPP people have protested or joined the union. Many are misled and many don't see it as political, and that's their right too. And I know that many of them may go there, but they'll vote PPP at the end of the day. So I'm not too worried about that. We're not victimizing because you go on the strike. But I want them to understand that this is a political strike. This has nothing to do with their interests. And sometimes they're intimidated too. Many of them are intimidated. They got to go out or else we treat you badly, or something like that. So they asked me about that. I think it was the Kaichor. So getting back, I missed your point again.
I was wondering whether you...
Oh, yes,
thought the
when
strike
I'm
would
worried
widen.
about it. It was the old playbook. APNU will try it. They promised that this year we'll see more disruptions. So they're calling Lincoln Lewis, calling for people to come on the street, the old same Lincoln Lewis. I've had to deal with him 25 years ago. The bauxite workers chased him from a meeting where I was because they said he is an old scamp.
And quickly...
And they chased him off.
quickly-
And he never forgave me for that because he was busy with, selling out the workers at OMI. And you look at his dismal history. They were trying to... he caused basically the disruption in the bauxite industry. Misled the workers. Alcoa walked away. Everybody walked away. And we had to pick up the pieces and try to keep the industry going. Walked away. So nothing new.
Mr. Jaffarali in Parliament during the budget debate said that Mr. Dharamlal will be returning. Will he be returning as a minister after 2025?
I don't know what Jafar Ali said, and we have never had any such discussion. We've never had any discussion. We are planning to win the 2025 elections. You know that for sure. We're planning to win it, and then the president will decide who the cabinet is. I don't know, Jafar Ali might have slept one day and had his own vision or something like that. The president has not decided who will be in the cabinet in 2025. And at that time it will be discussed. So you have a lot of craziness that goes on in the parliament and stuff. But I can assure you, the cabinet for the post-2025 election has not been picked as yet.
Dr. Jagdeo, Chinese critic for TBN. I know I'm a little late, but I know you were addressing certain issues with the press conference of the opposition. I don't know if you addressed the opposition touted economists who suggested or tried to tie the IMF's report on Guyana, pitting Caribbean countries, putting Guyana lower, try to tie that report with Skeldon. Now that's way back and it's way off, a child could see. Can you explain from a genuine economist's point of view to bring clarity to Guyanese before they get confused with this?
But last week, I think what is happening is that Norton feels a bit embarrassed. So he felt embarrassed because he went to Parliament, he had a long speech that he read, and his speech purported to unveil a development strategy. He called it people-centered strategy, but it was a one-paragraph, basically, kind of strategy. I had to demonstrate last week what a real strategy looks like. I brought one volume of 6, and I read the table of content as to what issues normally you will address in a strategy. He then concluded that he has priority areas, and I pointed out that in his priority areas for his one paragraph strategy that he unveiled, that 800 billion of this year's 1.1 trillion budget are allocated to the very same areas. He then said he developed some fancy coefficient for wages and salaries, took the wages and salaries and deflated it by GDP, the whole GDP, and then discounted the tax rate, but not just personal tax. He looked at the whole tax base, including indirect taxes. He then discounted it further by inflation rate and came up with a number and then said, look at this number in 2019, it's higher than 2016. And I pointed out that's not economics, it's nonsense, pure nonsense. And I pointed out also that the ratios didn't make any economic or common sense for that matter, because this ratio could be higher based on 2 factors. One, the growth of the nominator, or the decline of the denominator, which is, so you can have a recession in the economy and the ratio grows, and the ratio is supposed to show improvement in wages in relation to the size of the economy. That is nonsensical. I pointed that out too. He then quoted a 2017 IMF report and said that the IMF report said basically that 41% of the government expenditure is lost, and he put it through corruption. And there was that report done in the past, but it was an efficiency ratio, which is different than corruption. And I pointed out the fact that he didn't say it was a 2017 report, and secondly, was conflating the efficiency ratio with corruption, the loss of expenditure. So I think he was a bit embarrassed about that too. So he came back this week with this nonsense about he mentioned it again, it's a PIM, right, and report. It's a 2017 report. But the problem is you can have lots of reports. If you can't read and understand the report, that's a tragedy. And that is what he suffers from. You could get all the reports and, so so I don't want to go through all the other things that I pointed out. His budget presentation was a disaster. It was almost 2 hours of nonsense, nothing, zero. And the usual stuff, the government not spending anything, nothing for poor people in the budget, only spending on capital, not recurrent, all of this going for corruption, these projects going for corruption, etc. You just heard he mentioned the corruption today on the main road, and he didn't understand that it's done by the ministry. He said it's some private contractor will get the work, and that we're doing it on a road that was to be rebuilt, which is not true. It's on another road. The guy doesn't pay enough attention to what he is doing, or he doesn't. I don't understand. Disaster of an opposition leader.
In trying to disseminate information, opposition member Maipal, opposition MP Maipal, suggested that the government last year expended $6 billion for a head office for the Public Works Ministry, and that has not been accounted
that's not
for.
True. Where is this building? It's not true. What we're saying is that eventually they're building a new headquarters for housing, then they would build one for their police, but it's not just to go back to the old brick dam type operation, so you'd have a series of activities there of a different qualitative nature. It's almost like to manage the police force at Brick Dam. Ultimately, we're going to award a contract now for the public works. We believe that these locations are prime locations, decentralized, more comfortable environment. They're in little pieces everywhere, and that will happen. That will eventually go with public works. So that's not true. It didn't happen. It's going to happen. We're going to spend more money on government buildings, but to make our workers more comfortable, modernize the services available to them, but not for like Office of the President. We had proposals to build a bigger building. The President is still using this, still using State House. It's not for prestige activities. It is for better functioning of the government. At least we will be getting something when it's done. They built the 1.2 or 1.4, we don't even know the numbers, or it could be 1.6. The place for the donkey park that we have just next door here, it's called again Durban Park Stadium. Tell my Paul, it's not like that. Not like that. No, we're not building that kind of thing.
Vice President Jagdeo, as it stands, there's a bit of a standoff between the government and the teachers' union. What's the end game? Not discussing what the rates will be or whatever, but things need to get back to normality. What's the government's perception on the end game?
Once this is to keep the country in turmoil and they have a political motive, this is, you'll never be able to satisfy, because the end game is not teachers and welfare. If they had a conscience, teachers union, and you often have to compare with your opponent. So in spite of what Kaichor said, why we're comparing? Because they're a disaster for our country. That's why we have to compare with them sometimes. But if they had a conscience and they look at the budget, and I explained that earlier, and they look at the efforts we have made to change the circumstances in the education sector, they should be working with us. But if you have a political motive, then you're not so much concerned about peace and working relationship. You have to always have a disruptive sort of behavior. And this union has a political motive, the union leadership, not a motive for peace and working together and getting the best for our teachers. So I can't say that will happen, but we will not bend over backwards to ensure that a political plot against us succeed. Trust me, we'll not do that. So we'll be vigorous whilst we support our teachers across this country, all our teachers. We're not going to allow any political cabal to pressure us into anything. So you're going to have a firm position in the government on that.
If there's any opportunities of teachers reaching out without a union, I don't know if it's possible. I don't know what the laws are.
The teachers have
Will the
reached out.
ministry
The
be?
president addressed a number of issues. After that meeting, I sat with him. The rates for graduate teachers, we changed that. So there are 4,000 odd people on goal. The moment they finish gold scholarship and stuff, once they have the appropriate qualification, they suddenly start getting increments for their qualifications. So a number of those things were addressed. The hinterland allowances, etc. Or a number of things raised by the teachers directly with the president were addressed. But they don't want to focus attention on that issue because that will make them look bad. So they go back to the one metric, wage increase. But we should look at the conditions of service of teachers, not just wage increase.
Marcel Thomas from the Starbuck News.
Yes, Marcel.
Today we were informed that an application was filed in court seeking judgment, I think, because of your absences from Parliament, your successive absences, stating that you, well, according to the Constitution, would have vacated your seat and that should be enforced. How do you respond to that?
So,
let me give you all one time, so I don't have to do this.
Go. Apnu really wants to get me out there very rare. Apnu hits me with a passion, bro.
And
that's for the speaker to decide.
And two, on the gas to shore, a follow-up. You said about the first or second quarter of this year, you were hoping that the funds are approved.
That they go to the board,
Exxon has said that for its part, its scope of work, they're going to be completed by the end of this year. That is bringing the pipe for the gas to shore. Does that tie up government's scope of works? Would it be completed in time to have the two integrated so that the project could go ahead?
So the
as
thing
it
is that, okay, all right, let me go ahead, Marcel. You have more than one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't like this mic thing, so I just want to get it out of the way. You spoke about revenues in the budget, 800 billion being from other sources. A significant sum of that comes from the GRA, the Guyana Revenue Authority. Their workers have been complaining, they complained to us recently, that there's no allocation in the budget, this year's $1 trillion budget for a new building for them. They don't know where the land that you said that they would get is located. Please for an update on what's happening with GRA, where's their building, what's happening with their building, where is their land? And I had something, the hotel that's slated to be built on Carifesta. Where on Carifesta would that be? That's it.
So what was the parliament, So that's a matter for the speaker and we'll respond accordingly, right? So we'll deal with that accordingly. And the Exxon pipeline. So the pipeline, they anticipated coming by the end of the year. I think the project was originally intended to be completed then, by the end of the year. That is the power plant and the NGL facility. I think it would be substantially completed. So you wouldn't have much of a mismatch. And we have a task force that's looking at all of these things together. in which Exxon is also, Exxon sits on that task force too. It's separate from the government task force. But Exxon is there. The people who are building the NGL facility and the power plant, and those who are working on the evacuation of the power. That's the transmission main. So we have a close coordination between all three of these areas. So this is something that we anticipate that we may have a small timing difference, but they're all moving ahead. All three components are moving ahead as we speak. The new building for GRE, Mahipal may complain about that because they actually got a new building because remember the CLECO building, they were elsewhere and we bought that CLECO building. I think it may be NIS bought it and rented it to the government. So they, as an investment. So I don't think we paid for it. NIS gets a healthy revenue from the building. So they did have a new building in the past. And so we probably have to eventually get a new building for GRA too. But they did fare better than many others. Yes, Camp Street. Remember they were at Lamaha Street, there were different places, and then we got the Camp Street. At that time, Camp Street building was a powerful new building. Now it's based on the new standards that's being developed. So eventually they would have to get a new building for GRA, but I don't think it's this year, it's gonna happen this year. And they have a ton of facilities. Most likely the buildings would be along either the corridor going from Georgetown to Eccles, the new road, or on the new highway. The new highway that's going from Ogle to the bridge. No, but the government has land there. So once they decide on the project, it will go on one of these places.
And in the interim for the mold, that is.
Yeah, what the station should be asked that question, what he's doing about the mold and stuff like that. He's the head of GRE, that the workers are as comfortable as possible, etc. And the hotel on Carifesta, the president dealt with this. This is some of the lands there along Carifesta Avenue, the GNS complex and stuff. The president dealt with it in great detail. Yes, he dealt with it at his, one of the speeches he made.
He didn't go into detail.
Oh, he did not go into detail. Okay, all right. So I don't think it does. I don't think it does.
NIS.
Yeah. I don't know the exact two grounds, but there are two grounds there.
But those grounds aren't in trusts?
No, they're not in trust. None of them. And the lands were checked and they are public lands. So as far as I'm concerned, or the records that were sent to the government from Lands and Survey, that these belong to the state. The lands belong to the state. But this would change the whole area, and it will also flow onto a boardwalk for the country hopefully from Camp Street all the way to the roundabout, that people would have access to Guyane. So public infrastructure there probably changes along the park, a lot of investment in the park itself.
Mr. Jagdeo,
So you're dealing with that question too? All right, I'll come back to you in a minute. Anyone else? All right, let me go with Kaichor and then I come back. Right in that one, right?
Yeah, sure, from Belgrave, Kaichor News. My question is on the gas to energy project. When the gas finishes from Liza 1 and 2, where will Guyana get more gas to supply the Wales gas plant?
Well, I dealt with that question before, and we have to extend the life for 10 years of the project, okay? So I dealt with that many times before. So it's the project ends, the Lisa project ends in 2037. Okay? So the project will be extended for 10 years so that you could have the gas for at least 20 odd years. That will make the whole project feasible. If you look at the legislation, Section 38 and 39 of the Petroleum Activities Act, you will see that a company can apply and then it goes to the cabinet. The minister has to take it to the cabinet. And if the cabinet decides that the project will have a national impact, they can extend the life of the project, the particular project, Lisa, not any others, only the project that's on the question here. So you should check that out.
Just for some more clarity, follow-up, something I'm just trying to understand how, based on the figures Exxon is producing, 645,000 barrels of oil per day. I think it's estimated to have some 1.7 billion barrels of oil in Liza 1, Liza 2, and Payara. When, at the rate that Exxon is producing, this oil is going to finish within like 5 years, because they said by 2024, they would have taken out 500 million barrels of oil. So if the oil is finished by then, what happens then?
I don't understand. The oil is not all coming from Lisa, the 600 and something thousand. It's coming from different sources. Yeah. So the reservoir is large enough to operate a gas field and an oil and still produce oil from Lisa for the 20 years.
Given at the rate that 645,000.
Right, yeah. So it is so that this will be operated for that entire period. That is what we're working on.
There won't be any case of extending the pipeline to any other project?
Possibly the pipeline could go to, if we have to decide where the additional 80 million cubic will come from, right? Because that's only 50 million cubic we're talking about in the first instance. So they would have to decide now that if another feed will be connected to another project to bring in the 80 million cubic, or we will just use it from Lisa. That's a discussion we have to have.
Has any cost come up in a discussion, how much it will cost to extend if needed?
No, but this is part, it should be a minimal cost because most of the pipeline would be being built. That is from coming in and connected with the plant. So it's just a feeder pipeline, minimal cost. But remember, we're amortizing the entire pipeline from the project numbers that I gave you earlier. We're amortizing the entire pipeline. And still the cost is like 4 cents per kilowatt hour. So we're paying back for the full pipeline, but we'll have an additional 80 million cubic feet of gas coming in. That's practically coming in on an infrastructure that's already paid for. So it makes it very, very feasible. We didn't even add that to the benefits at this point in time, but that could be added to the benefits. Yes, and then, yeah.
Just second question, actually two actually. The second one, at a recent press conference, the Exxon Guyana head, Alistair Routledge, said that Exxon right now is more focused on production.
Yes, I saw that. That is it. This is just an assessment, an appraisal, and giving us numbers. It's an appraisal and giving us numbers. It's not going to change the discovery. It's just a timing when we increase our reserves or not. In fact, they have a greater kind of need to do that because globally, your people look for the parent company. They look at your reserve, your proven reserve, and that helps to move stock prices for the global company, Global Exxon. But they've decided that they want to focus more rather than do the appraisals as to how many barrels are in these discoveries, etc. They'd focus all their appraisal effort on the 11 billion barrels that are proven reserves already because the projects we have in the pipeline will focus on these areas. So it's a logical thing. It's not going to change the discovery. It's just an assessment and an alteration of the reserves at some point in time.
Okay. My final question is, there are some folks that made some allegation, I think they're from Barbados, in a video saying that monies are being, I think they're part-time workers, monies are being deducted from their salaries for not attending government meetings. Is this true? Have you looked into that?
Never heard about it. It could be, it couldn't be. If anybody is deducting it, then that person is stealing the money. Is stealing the money. So you should find out, could you find the person who said that?
I have a video.
Right, can you get that person, send me the video, because if somebody deducts your money, then if they can deduct your money for not going to your job. Because a lot of people don't show up at work, and then once we get the record, you're not getting paid for that day when you don't go, but not for anything else. Because a lot of people sometimes don't want to show up to work too. They think it's a free thing, and they just don't show up. When we launched the program, we made it clear, you're working the 10 days. You're working the 10 days, not free money. Yes, please.
Good afternoon, Kimal King, Oil Now. When does government expect, at which point will it sign a gas sales agreement with Exxon for the gas that's going to be transported from the gas to energy project? Are there any other critical agreements that you need to put in place before that project starts
Like
up?
Exxon be talking to you or something, Kimal, because it's something we've been negotiating for quite a while. The principles have been laid out already that the gas is for free, right? And there are drafts going, so we have to conclude those. But I think it's a straightforward thing. It's going to be done soon.
Okay, and just for the record, I didn't talk to anybody.
Because
Yeah.
it's their concern has been, we're not getting it fast enough, and that's why I was wondering if they're trying to.
Okay, how close are you to signing contracts with the oil block auction awardees? Can you put a timer on that?
I don't want to put a timer. I think with the exception of one, has been the report has come in today. I asked them about it, have submitted the required info. So maybe that will come to cabinet now, and we will now know go or no go. That is to conclude the full agreement. But remember, the basics are, can you afford to pay the signing bonus? And do you have a credible source from which the signing bonus is coming? Remember that question that was raised. It's a credible source. You can't say I got it in 2 bags and I want to bring it in to the government. So those are the key questions for us, because we recognize that some of the companies don't have the great technical capacity, because with the locals, etc., and that they most likely will have to bring in people to operate in these licenses. But because we're getting the signing bonus, then we say you can bring in whomever you want, provided, of course, you stick with your plan. And there's an approved plan that they have to stick with. And if they don't meet the plan, there's a massive fine of 50% of the total cost of the plan. So those are our 2 safeguards: the signing bonus, the approved plan, and the potential fine of 50% of the approved plan.
So you said everyone has submitted the requested information for your due diligence testing?
Yes, that except in one and I guess by next week or so we'd get a firm position coming to the cabinet.
Has the government had any additional consideration or talks with respect to Repsol's request to have the Kaduku block back, or a portion of it?
No, we have not had any further discussion.
Is it safe to say the door is closed on that being returned to
I'm
that
not
group?
saying the door is closed, but we have not had any further discussion.
Okay, I saw that the Ministry of Natural Resources put out a request for proposals for the cost audit for the
Yes.
21 to 2023 costs. Given how long the processes with respect to the last 2 audits have taken, can you first say when you expect those to be concluded? I know you talked about
So
not
the
wanting to.
request for proposal went out, and I think we have 1 month to submit the request. So I anticipate that maybe by mid-year, we'll sign an agreement before mid-year. And if they have 4 to 6 months for conclusion of the audit, so we are going to the end of the year. Hopefully by that time, we would have resolved the differences on the first audit, and the second one, we would have had a strong position from GRA. So when the next audit comes in, hopefully within the GRA, which acts as our advisor, they'd be able to move fast on it. But the audits would have been completed and current.
What's happening right now? What's happening?
What do you mean, what's happening? That the discussions are still ongoing. I told you already. So the position now is, we've made it clear, we're not going to have a negotiated settlement any longer. We're not accepting any lower figure. We have to arbitrate this matter. They're on the first audit. The second one, they're examining all the details. GRA has all the details, so they still need to examine the findings of the auditors. And so that's what's happening there on those two. And then the third one, we're going out to tender to do the audit.
So what can the public expect you to report at the conclusion of these processes?
That we've done the audit, the technical people have done the audit, and that our advisors, we have acted consistent with the advice of the technical advisors. That's what I wish to report. And that we've safeguarded the interests of the country. This is the report.
I mean in terms of findings.
Like what precisely? Like you can, like how the 215, there were issues with the findings. So the findings said, we can't account. There's 3 categories of that make up the 215 million or whatever, 212 or 215, I remember the detail, right, 215. Some not enough documentation, some totally excluded, they should not be included, etc. Now, so you know the composition of it. The second audit has also identified a number, and it has said what it believes in. So, for example, they have this novelty. They're saying that we don't believe that all the costs for some activities should be apportioned to the Stabroek block, that some have to be apportioned to other blocks because the services that were paid for by the Stabroek block were extended to the Kaishore and Kanji block. So that's a real finding. And so these are what the auditors found, that's what would be reported, what the auditors found. No, you're not going to have an attempt by the government to change any of these things. We'd have to address those.
And how much for the 2021 to 2023 period expenses are we looking at? What's the number?
I wouldn't be able to tell you that. You would probably have to find out from the ministry.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Jagdeo, very quickly, has your party submitted the names of the nominees for the Constitutional Reform
Yes,
Commission?
yes.
And who are they?
I don't remember. It's Pauline, Frank Anthony, Anil Nandalal, and 2 others. I can't remember right now. I think it might be Siraj and someone else. And Anil Kumar, right? And Siraj. Oh, Gail Teixeira, and Gail Teixeira is the 4th nominee. Oh, and Kwame McCoy, yes. No, not Siraj, Kwame McCoy, 4. Yeah, Kwame, remember, sorry. Yeah, so McCoy. Pauline, Minister of Sukai, yeah.
Mr. Jagdeo, might press you a bit more. What exactly the Exim Bank wants Guyana to provide in order to make a decision?
Oh, they don't have nothing that we can provide, but like with each funding agency, they hire their own consultants to come and review the project. They review, we had great meetings, they review everything on the project, environmental, design everything, and then, so when they go to the board, they don't go on the basis of what we submit. It's a report to say from their consultants that cost over $1 million that will go to the board to say, we have examined the project. The feasibility is all settled and everything. We've had great issue, no problem with that. Then they go and say, we've examined the total project. This is a sustainable project. It will deliver the benefits so that they have their own view. This happens routinely with almost every agency. That is why I say that APNU often they don't understand a project, how it goes. So, for example, they say, oh, we had planned to build a bridge across the river. But to get to that bridge, you have to do your own feasibility study. When you do a feasibility study, your own feasibility study, then you can apply for a loan. If you agree, we're going to a multilateral financial institution or even a bilateral source. They have their internal process, which could often take a year to 2 years. This happens routinely. The assessment on the Linden-Soestdijk Highway from the Islamic Development Bank nearly took 2 years. They, with their own work, they come and verify. They don't just put their money in just like that. It's a routine thing. So from the time we made the application to now, this is what we recruited a consultant last year. They're now doing their work, and then it will move forward. It's routine. So a number of people who were unfamiliar with the process and who, just don't know anything, they see this as a big issue. For me, I see this as routine. And this delay, the government not getting the money. In fact, it's moving fast. Sometimes it takes 3-4 years to secure multilateral funding because of their own internal process. Why do you think, if you look at my speeches globally, I've been speaking about the need to change the multilateral system of intermediation of funds because it puts a lot of burden on the developing world. We have greater capacity now to negotiate with these countries. So we can move pretty fast. You try some countries that have been trying 7-8 years. They don't even get funding. They don't even get the funding. It's a different system. And that's why I don't find it everything. Even now, you've heard me complain about the classification of countries and how the classification on the OECD risk classification can affect your interest rates. So in the early year, because we haven't done much work on this for years, the first loan that we took from the to do the hospital, because it came out of UKIF, they had to look at the OECD classification. We are in category 6 of 7. 6 is bad, 7 is the worst. And that meant 13% of the loan is an upfront payment. But when amortized over the period, it works out to an additional maybe 1% on the interest rate. When we managed to get it down to category 5 now. So that immediately, it moves from 13% to about 9%. And we are working now to try to get it down lower because I've argued that our debt figures are even better than the European countries that are categorized as category 3. So now we are working to change that globally so our cost of borrowing can plummet even further. A lot of these things are being worked at simultaneously. APNU thinks this is just GAF. To get to sell $750 million worth of forest carbon, they don't know the amount of work that we put in, technical work. It requires that. They don't know about just getting this done in the one category, the amount of technical work that we put in. All of these things require work at the same time. They think it's just getting a project, talking about it, putting it in your manifesto, and it gets work done. I pointed out the gas to energy project. It's not just that bit that you talk about, the Exim bit. It's the Exxon bit that we got to get now the gas strategy going, the gas sale agreement going. It is the part to build the substations at Vreden Hoop and at Garden of Eden and here at Eccles and the control center to move all of this power. And it has to be done in time for that project too. It's so many moving parts, and you got to look at all of them simultaneously. They think it's just like going to a press conference and talking bilge.
In other words, if you were not getting the money, you would already know.
Yes, and I said, what happens if the extreme happens? We have already been funding from the budget, and we're making contingency. We can do that. The project is going to be built. It's going to be built, and then you will see the difference it makes in the lives of our people, for those who are violating.